We have talked about the heroes. Let's dive in to the new villains we're getting in the Age of Apocalypse box. Hello and welcome to Nelson All Over Cards. My name is Nelson and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the encounter cards, the encounter sets, the villains that are coming in the new announced box, Age of Apocalypse from Fantasy Flight Games. Now, we did a video where we talk about the heroes that came in this box. That video is going to be linked right about here, I think, or down below, and you can check that out. Also, this is coming out on the same day that we're doing a live stream with a lot of the creators in the Marvel Champions space, where we're going to be talking about that box. That live stream is going to be taking place later tonight. If you're watching this after the release of the video, that roundtable will be on YouTube in the coming days, and I will make sure to link that down below as well. So there's a lot of content coming out around this box, and that's exciting because it's an awesome box. We're going to be going through, we're going to be talking about some of the villains, the modular sets, the overall campaign kind of vibe or the idea of the overall campaign, and there's going to be timestamps down below. So if you want to jump to a specific thing that we're going to be talking about, feel free to do that. But the last video was long, so we're just going to dive right in. This is the end of the Mutant Trilogy. So we have had Mutant Education, Mutant Genesis. Mutant Education's a card. Mutant Genesis, Next Evolution, and now Age of Apocalypse. This is finishing off our mutant waves. So it kind of has an overarching story. This is right after Professor X has died, and we are going to be diving in and taking on Apocalypse. The first villain in the box, or the first scenario in the box, is Unus. I'm not 100% sure on the pronunciation there, but he's the first in the box. We have had Stage 1 shown to us. Stage 1 is a 1/2 villain with 12 hit points, toughness, and he has a dynamic ability based on the amount of threat that's on Gene Pool. Now, Gene Pool is a permanent side scheme we'll talk about here in a little bit, but let's talk about his ability. If he has 3 threat on Gene Pool, he gains Retaliate 1, 6, he gains Stalwart, 9, he gains an Amplify icon. So you really want to manage the threat on Gene Pool, and I'm wondering how this is going to be translated into the future stages of the villain. Are we going to have the same thing? We're going to 3, 6, 9 Retaliate, Stalwart, Amplify. Are those thresholds going to go down so he gets Retaliate at 1 or at 2, or is he going to start getting worse effects? Is he going to get Overkill? Is he going to get all this? There's a lot of design space I'm excited to see, but we've only seen that first stage. So we'll see. Gene Pool comes in its own modular set called Infinite. So we're going to be talking about Gene Pool and Unus kind of together because it is I assume it's a required mod set because it deals all about Gene Pool, but you can take the Infinites and put it into any game of Marvel Champions that you play, which is pretty cool because this comes with a permanent setup side scheme. So Gene Pool comes in, starts with 4 threat. So already at the start of the game, Unus starts with Retaliate 1. So there's no loss conditions. It's permanent, so it can't go away, but you are going to be adding threat to it throughout the game because it states that after an ally is defeated by anything other than consequential damage, you have to place 3 threat here. So powers up Unus and some other cards that we're about to talk about. It's really cool. It's another really cool way to dissatisfy chump blocking, or dissuade chump blocking, I should say. And it's a cool kind of symbiotic relationship between the villain and a mod set where you're powering up the villain, you're getting stronger. You're also going to start powering up cards like Infinite Soldier, which is a minion in this set that's a 1, 2, 3 stat line. Then it also kind of has the same idea where if there's 3 threats on Gene Pool, it gains Quick Strike, 6 it gains Surge, and then at 9 threat on Gene Pool, it gets +3 hit points. So there's a lot going on, and I really like the idea of the mod set to kind of push away chump blocking that isn't just giving overkill to the villain. And so we've seen a lot more ideas coming out of the last couple boxes, and I'm here for it. Unus also has some power-ups in his kit that work with Gene Pool, like the Prelate Sidearm. This gives him a +1 attack, and then after he defeats an ally, you place 1 threat on Gene Pool. So you are going to be adding more threat to Gene Pool outside of just the Infinite set. You're also going to have some of the villain cards interacting with that, and you can get rid of this attachment by making a basic attack against him and spending an energy and a punch resource. So we're probably not just going to want to chump block, but you also could chump block if you have a really high justice player and you're kind of really managing the threat there. We haven't seen all the cards out of any of these sets, so anything that I say is potential strategies going against these types of villains could be completely thrown off with some other cards that we just haven't seen. The main scheme for Unus is hunting gene traders. It threats out at 11 threat per player and has a forced response that after stage 1 of the villain phase, after you add threat to this scheme, you add a threat to gene pool. So it's a slow burn, but it still is accumulating threat throughout the game. So even if you're just not chump blocking, you're still going to be adding threat to this. I'm confident we're going to see more ways to add threat, but that's kind of the idea of the first scenario. I'm interested in it. I think that it's hard to judge some of these scenarios without seeing more of the cards and more of the interactions, but it seems really cool. The next scenario I think is, I think each one of these scenarios I get more excited for. So the next scenario is the Harbingers of Doom. This is a multi-villain scenario, the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Similar to like Tower Defense, Sinister Assault, where you're going to have multiple villains out on the table at the same time. Then there's going to be an active villain. Now, we don't have a clear understanding on how the active villain is chosen or swapped yet. So that has a pretty big impact on the difficulty or how you're going to be playing this scenario. But just know that one of them will be active and the other, that's the one that's going to be attacking or thwarting against you. They all have a kind of a ability that states that they cannot be defeated unless all the other ones are at 0 HP. So you really do have to kill every single one of the horsemen out there for them to be considered defeated. So we're going to have to be spreading out that damage, figuring out exactly how we want to approach and attack the 4 villains. And the other thing is that kind of goes into that equation is that they all have forced response based off of the amount of health. So if a villain is at 0 HP, they do not trigger this forced response, but the forced response on these villains are absolutely incredibly bad. So let's look at them. So this is side A, and I assume we'll get a side B for maybe expert play or a more challenging way to play. But just know that when we're talking through these villains, these are the side A or the standard side. Yeah, so War is the first one up. He's a 1 to 9 hit points per player. Force response is after War attacks you, and he has at least 1 HP. Discard an upgrade or support you control. I hate it. I hate it so much. I don't want to do that. But it's a really cool thing. So, like, are we going to be focusing on War? This force response only triggers if he has more than 0 health. So do we throw everything we got at War, and then we don't have to worry about discarding an upgrade or support? Or are we going to focus on Famine, who's a 2/1/9 hit points per player, and then after she attacks, you discard the top 10 cards of your deck. So there's different strategies, and I feel like each one of these horsemen kind of attack different strategies of the game, and so I don't necessarily know if there's always going to be a right answer of I need to kill War first. I think it's going to be kind of deck makeup and how you want to approach, but I think Famine is probably one of the lesser bad ones. Words are hard. And also now I really want to run like White Fox, Digging Deep, all those things that you discard off the top of your deck, but it is going to accelerate you to that encounter card, so that's not super great. Pestilence is our third horseman. Pestilence is a 2/1/9, and after she attacks, you treat the text box of your hero as blank until the next villain phase. So this can really mess with some heroes that are super ingrained with their hero text box. Dominoes, Doctor Stranges, a lot of them have really good abilities, and is going to hurt some more than others. Hulk is now not needing to discard his hand, I guess. Which is kind of fun. Anyways, Death is our last one. He kind of looks like Archangel here. It's a 1/9, and then after Death attacks, if he has at least 1 hit point, deal 1 damage to each character you control. So, not 100% sure, like I was saying, how you're going to be moving this active villain token around, but if we can figure out how to manipulate and make sure that maybe that active villain is only on the one that's most beneficial to you, stun locking, stay in alter ego. There's a lot of ways that we're going to be able to ideally mess with this reaction because it's only after they attack. So maybe I'm bringing a lot of stuns, maybe I'm staying in alter ego a lot, but yeah. If those horsemen were not mean enough, as you could probably guess, we have some cards that mess with the activation, similar to like Golden Horse. So Golden Horse says to attach to the villain with the fewest HP remaining, and does not currently have aerial, so that currently only is death. That villain then gains the aerial trait, +1 to both of their stats. That villain with this attachment is considered to have at least 1 HP. So all the force responses that you're triggering now happen, even if they're at 0. You cannot win because everybody has to have 0 HP. So you have to get rid of this, and you can only get rid of this by a response that says after you attack the attached villain, you resolve the force response as if it had attacked you to discard this card. So if this goes on to war, you are discarding an upgrade or support, and you kind of have a little bit of autonomy on when you want to do that. And so maybe you get a skilled investigator out, you can trigger skilled investigator, then get rid of skilled investigator, something like that. But they're nasty. They are not great. Metal Wings is kind of the attachment, I guess, for death. So Golden Horse attaches to someone who doesn't have aerial. This one can only be attached to Death, who is the aerial version. Death gets +1 to the stats and retaliate 1, and is considered to have 1 HP. So all the stuff that we were just talking about, the force response, not being able to win, you have to attack, resolve the force response of Death to discard this card in order to win. It's going to be tough. Now, all of those are bad, but the worst card in this set so far that we've seen is Rough Riders, and it is rough. It's not even a pun. It's bad. It's bad. It's a treachery card, and it says when revealed, result of force response on the active villain as if it had at least 1 HP, then move to the next villain and do the same thing. So you can lose an upgrade or support, and then I think that's probably going to be the activation order. I'm not 100% sure on that, but if you go war, you discard an upgrade or support, then you discard 10 cards, which very likely could get you another encounter card. Whew. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. I'm excited to see how it works. I really enjoy the multi-villain scenarios. This feels similar to a lot of the other ones, but it feels like always that we have this little tweak. And so I'm excited to see how this one shapes up. The next scenario seems freaking sweet. This is Apocalypse. So Apocalypse feels like they just keep upping their scenario design. And this feels almost like Magneto and Hela kind of got together and created Apocalypse as a scenario, because there is a side mission that needs to be completed before we can kill Apocalypse. So very similar to Magneto, but those side missions come with minions, which is very similar to Hela. So it's got this story approach, and I'm here for it. But let's talk about it. Apocalypse, first thing, has 4 stages, so that's new. Stage 1 is a 1 scheme 2 attack 8 health minion with tough. When the main is completed, you remove all the threat and flip to stage 2. So you do not progress to stage 2 when you defeat or reduce his health to 0. You only move to stage 2 when the main scheme is completed. So it's a little bit different. It's a little bit wonky. It's a different design, and I'm excited. But stage 2 is now a 2/2/9 steady and tough. Same force interrupt. Goes to stage 3, which becomes a 2/3/10 steady tough. Flip to stage 4, which is the end game, and we're at a 3/3/11. He's stalwart, he's tough, he gains overkill. If the main is completed, then the players lose the game. But here we are with the stage 4 villain. So there's a lot of cards that deal with the stage of the villain. White Tiger, unfortunately, is limited to 3 card draws, which I just learned in the recording of the Shadow of the Cast episode, which will be out next week. So check that out on Villain Theory's channel. But my favorite combo is Muster Courage, which gives out X number of toughs cards based on the stage number to a maximum of 3 characters. So technically, you can give Colossus 2 toughs and 2 other characters tough status cards. Is it practical? No. But is it fun? Yes, it is. So there's no way that it states to defeat him. So this is where the main scheme kind of comes into play. This threats out at X per player, where X is the printed HP of Apocalypse. So in stage 1, it threats out at 8, whereas in stage 4, it threats out at 11 per player. Now, it says when he would be defeated. So when you reduce Apocalypse's HP to 0, you discard each attachment from him, you heal all damage from him, and you remove X threat from this scheme, which is that printed HP. So he's invincible. But we have to find a different way to kill him, which is where we start making our way through some of these side schemes. And that starts out with Heart of the Empire. So this is going to be another side scheme stack, very, very similar to Magneto. And I love Magneto. So Heart of the Empire comes in with 2 threats and an acceleration icon. Threat cannot be removed while a prelate minion is in play. What are prelate minions? I don't know. I have the same question. We have not seen what those look like yet, and I think that's going to dictate the design of this scenario pretty significantly once we understand what those prelate minions look like. But until we get to see some, we're left wondering. But when this card is defeated, you reveal a random prelate minion, deal each other player a encounter card, and flip the card over to Towering Citadel. This is a 3 threat, 2 acceleration, has the same restriction that threat cannot be removed with prelates, and then when it gets defeated, you flip, or you deal a prelate minion, everyone gets an encounter card, you go to Tyrant's Throne. Feels like Magneto, right? Yep. So same thing here. 3 acceleration icons. Yikes. And 4 threats. When you defeat it, you guessed it, you get a minion and counter card. But then we get to flip over to an attachment called No Longer Worthy. This attachment heals 5 HP per player from Apocalypse and states that he cannot take damage while a prelate minion is in play, which seems really bad. But most importantly, you ignore the Force Interrupt on the main scheme, and it says when Apocalypse is defeated, the players win the game. So, like I was saying, this feels like Magneto, where you're going through that side scheme, and Hela, where you're bringing out minions and side schemes as you're progressing through the scenario, and I am so here for it. I'm curious to see what these prelate minions look like. I think that those are going to be the driving force behind the difficulty of the scenario, because like, we only have 2 threat, 3 threat, 4 threat. So what is that, 9 threat? And that's not per player. That's just 9th base threat to push through. And so I assume that these prelate minions are going to be not the nicest minions we've ever seen, which is going to lead into the difficulty of, you know, we have to kill the minion, which is the bigger threat than the actual threat mitigation. So far, it does not look too difficult, but it does look like a lot of fun, and there's a lot of unknown variables that can really up that difficulty. But I'm excited for Apocalypse. I think heroes aside, on the villain side of things, everything that was announced in this box, I think I am most excited for Standard 3. Standard 2 is a significant step up in difficulty than Standard 1. Standard 3 feels like it's going to be similar levels of difficulty to Standard 1, but it really messes with the Nemesis set and the Nemesis minions entering play. So freaking cool, because Shadow of the Past is what brings those Nemesi into play from your hero kit. And Shadows does not get drawn that frequently, especially in a solo game, which is where a lot of my plays happen. So I think that the Nemesis design is such a cool space that we just don't get to see too frequently, and that's going to change, because Shadow, if we draw it in a fifth of our games, 20% of our games, that feels about normal. But if we don't see it, we don't see it, and we don't get to interact with a really cool mechanism. This changes that, because we get to add a double-sided environment called Pursued by the Past. This starts out with a side that has a forced response that states after you place a pursuit counter here, if the number of pursuit counters is 3 more than the number of players, you remove each pursuit counter, and then your Nemesis minion activates against you. If it is not in play, you flip it to the other side, which has a forced response that says after you flip to this side, go find your Nemesis minion, reveal it, search the set-aside area for your side scheme, reveal it, shuffle the rest of your set-aside Nemesis set into the encounter deck, and flip this back over. We're going to see a lot of Nemesis. I'm so excited. I love the fact that the minion can come out every single time. So if you have Pursued by the Past, you have that 4th counter in a solo game. The first time, everything comes out. It's like drawing Shadows of the Past. And the next time, you search deck, discard pile, and set aside for your Nemesis minion, but not your side scheme. So if you've already pulled it, you may go grab that Nemesis minion again. And so I think it's really going to change up the way that we approach the game. It's going to lower the variability, because now you kind of can see when that Nemesis may be coming, So I think it increases the difficulty, but also in a sense allows you to plan for it a little bit better. And so I'm so excited for Standard 3. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. A lot of the cards in the Standard 3 set interact with Pursuit by the Past, and they are similar to the cards in the Standard set. So like the new quote advance is Dark Design. So after you when revealed, you place a counter on Pursuit by the Past. Then if it has any counters on it, the villain schemes. So if your minion comes out, it isn't like a minion and scheme. The minion comes out because you place that third counter on it. You clear all the counters. Your minion's out, and you have that. But if the minion does not come out, they scheme. So it's not a 1-2 punch. You get one or the other effect, which is really nice. It creates a nice kind of timing or flow if you have multiple counters on the Pursuit by the Past. If you have 3 counters on Pursuit by the Past in a solo game, you are effectively safe from a advance. Now there are ways to place counters on a boost card, so you have to be careful there. But if you know that you have 3 counters and the villain's confused, you're not drawing an advance. So you may get your Nemesis minion, but you're not going to be hitting an advance. So it creates a lot of planning in that sense. Really cool. It has a boost effect that adds a counter to Pursuit by the Past. So regardless of when you hit this card, whether it be an effect or a boost, you're adding counters. So you are going to be consistently getting counters on Pursuit by the Past, which is really cool. There's a couple other cards called like Sinister Strike, which is similar to the Assault, and it kind of cares what form you're in. In Alter Ego, you add 1 counter and it surges. In Hero form, very similar to the previous card, you add a counter, then if it has any counters, the villain attacks. If not, you have pulled out your Nemesis minion. So kind of similar to Assault, but kind of acts in that same realm where you're dealing with the Pursuit by the Past, you're dealing with the Nemesis minion. We have a new Shadow replacement called Evil Alliance, and this says when you revealed, each Nemesis minion activates against you. If no minions activated against you this way, put 3 counters on Pursuit by the Past. So that's like 75% of the way to getting a Nemesis minion. Probably already have at least 1 counter on there. So this is a way that does not guarantee a draw. You're probably not getting shadows on the first, or your Nemesis minion on the first turn. It's going to take a lot of RNG, bad RNG for that to happen. So really nice way to smooth out the variability in when you get to pull those. I'm so pumped. I am so excited. This one also has a boost effect that adds a counter, and I am way more excited for this than Standard 2. I probably see myself playing a lot of Standard 3 because I really like the Nemesis design. This is going to interact with it so well. That being said, I also assume that this means we're going to get some Expert 3 coming out in the box. I'm excited to see how that interacts with the Standard 3 with the Pursuit by the Past. I want to know what your thoughts are too. So if you have a prediction or some theories on what we're going to see in Expert 3, let me know in the comments because I'm interested to see how they're going to interact with all of that. The campaign gimmick are missions. So each campaign kind of has their own little gimmick. The market in Galaxy's Most Wanted, where you can spend some of your victory points for new upgrades or cards. You have the reputation tracks and sinister motives. So this gimmick, the way that this is played, there are these mission side schemes. Now, these are side missions that we have to rely on allies to help us take care of. So you send allies to deal with these side missions, and while they're there, they cannot help with the main villain, but they also don't count towards your ally limit. They become your mission team. We're not 100% sure on the rules on these side missions, but the one that was previewed is called Evacuated Survivors. This has a force response on it that states after you resolve a mission attempt, place 1 attempt counter here and deal 1 damage to each ally at the mission. If 4 counters, you remove the mission team from the game and flip this card over. If you defeat it, which you defeated at 5 threat per player, you shuffle each card at the mission into its owner's deck and flip the card over and your mission team card over. Before we talk about the back of Evacuate Survivors, let's talk about that support card that I alluded to, Mission Team. It cannot be discarded and the first player gains control of it. You can exhaust this card to reduce the next cost of your ally played to the mission by 2. So not into play, so you can't use this to play Maria Hill for thwarting the main scheme. you have to play it to the mission, or you can exhaust it to make a mission attempt. So this is the way we're going to be making mission attempts, which probably has something to do with removing threat from the mission. Not 100% sure on the rules there, but we have things like in Lord of the Rings where there's a little bit of RNG to how threat would be removed. I'm thinking it's going to be along the lines of like you sum up the total amount of thwarts on the allies at the mission, and then flip the top card, reduce that thwart by the number of boost icons, and remove that much threat, or something like that. It does feel like there's not going to be a guaranteed way to do this because there are the attempts. So who knows? I'm kind of interested to see how this works. But yeah. The missions are also guarded by overseer minions like Sugarman. So Sugarman has 5 HP per player. He does not attack or thwart. He looks really goofy, and he can't not take damage while another minion is at the mission. He has a mission response that says after you discard cards, heal 3 damage from Sugarman for each physical resource discarded. What's a mission response? Again, not 100% sure what that means yet, but I assume we will get more information in the coming months. It's an interesting way for the game to kind of get a little bit of a shakeup. It has another area, another thing to manage, more complexity, which is not a bad thing, more complexity and more things to mess with. And so I'm interested to see how they work. But let's go back to Evacuated Survivors. If you're able to beat the mission, you get all the previously mentioned benefits, and then some benefits for the future of the campaign. So you'll probably write that, hey, you beat the mission, you'll get something in the future similar to like what we were doing in Next Evolution. You flip Evacuated Survivors over, you remove all cards from the mission from the game. If you beat it with threat, those were already shuffled back into your deck. So if you lose via mission counters, you're going to discard these cards. Or if you defeat the mission by removing all the threat, you're going to shuffle these cards back in. And then if it was not defeated, you deal each player a face-down encounter card. But then if it was defeated by reducing that threat, each player searches their deck for a card and adds it to their hand. Really nice benefits, but then also the mission team flips over. This is that support card. It becomes another Avengers Mansion. You exhaust and have a player draw a card. That's very, very, very good. And I am excited to have a free Avenger Mansion on the table. The missions seem interesting. I'm curious to see what the rest of the rules and other missions look like. But yeah, it seems like a nice way to add another kind of element to the game. The next section that we're going to dive into is kind of a speculation. I'm going to label this or kind of warn this as a little bit of a spoiler because this was not in the article that was posted. These were from some Reddit, Facebook detectives out there, and so if you don't want to miss this, just use the timestamps to jump forward past this section. But we're going to dive into it. I feel like that was enough buffer to start talking about it. I am not sure who saw this first, but the first one I saw was on Reddit from Wango Tango, and they grabbed a picture of the back of the box, which has a picture of all 5 villains. Unus is first, then War, then Famine, then we have Dark Beast. So Dark Beast is going to be another encounter that we are getting in the box. No idea what he looks like, but I'm sure we'll see what that is soon. And then we'll have Apocalypse as that 5th villain listed. Now, speculation. We could be getting something like we did with the Marauders from the previous box where the same villains are used for multiple scenarios. So that would be the 5 boxes capstone with Apocalypse. Or there could be a surprise villain in there because the back of the Mad Titan Shadow box has Corvus and Proxima as different villains, and they never picture Loki. And so there is a precedent of not showing every single villain in the box on the back of the box, so there could be a surprise villain. I want to know what your thoughts are on there. I've seen a couple of theories kind of floating around the internet, but I'm curious what you think. Let me know in the comments. So that is kind of the encounter side of the Age of Apocalypse box. Again, if you want to see more about the heroes, you can find the link to that video down below in the video description. I am so excited for this box. We have new heroes that look epic. Some of these scenarios look so very fun, and Standard 3 looks sick. I'm so pumped for Standard 3. But thank you all so very much for hanging out. If you are watching this on the day of release, in a couple hours, we are going to have the roundtable discussion. If you are watching after the fact, Ideally, that roundtable discussion is about to be posted or it's linked down below. So make sure you check that out because there's going to be a lot of excellent content creators on that call talking about this box. Thank you for hanging out. I appreciate you all and hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Peace.